Hey everyone, trouble with tribbles? I mean tariffs? You're watching Techstrong Gang. Hey everyone, happy Friday. Thank God it's Friday. It's Alan Schimmel here for Techstrong Gang, and thanks for joining us. We've got a lot to go over today. We've got trouble with tribbles and tariffs. We've got software supply chain issues, and serendipity is a strategy, or as some might say, throw it on the wall. A lot to go over. Let me introduce you to our gang members for today, though. First of all, joining us out west, she's still pretty in pink, not red for Valentine's Day, but pink today. It's our own marketing guru, radio host, everything, a little bit of everything, Lisa Martin. Hey, Lisa, how are you?
Hey, Alan, great to see you. Excited to break into AI-powered serendipity in C Block today.
I'm excited for it as well. I always like serendipity. It reminds me of the ice cream shop in New York.
Aw.
Yeah. We used to have one down here in Boca at the Boca Resort, but they closed it and been missing it since. But I'll be in New York soon. Maybe I'll stop. It's going to be a little cold for ice cream. But anyway, welcome, Lisa. It's great to have you here. Joining us, our man, he's not lost at sea, but he's out at sea. Resident security expert, defender of the Maple Leaf, our own Chris Blask. Hey, Chris, how are you?
Loving life, anchored off Marjo Key, Marjoe. You can Google Maps that to see where we are today. And glad to be here. Looking forward to the conversations.
Is Marjo Key settled? Are there people living on there, or is that just...
No,
it's
an island. It's 100 yards sort of north or south, 50 yards east or west. You know, north of the Sugarloaf Keys.
Yep.
So the Snipe Keys kind of cut the lower keys in half. And the east side is the quiet side. So we navigated over here last night after visiting friends and family in Key West, and spend the last week with Donna on board and enjoy the manatees and herons.
Absolutely. You're still south of Marathon?
Yeah, lower Keys. So the top of the Florida Reef is about 300 square miles of shallow water here that these boats were designed and built for. So this is their home stomping ground.
Enjoying the weather's been, well, it's been a little windy up this way, but the weather's been nice otherwise besides the wind. So enjoy, my friend. Moving from the Florida Keys, which is at about, zero sea level. He's on sea level. Up to the Rocky Mountain Highs, it's the guitar man, Mitch Ashley. Hey, Mitchell, how are you?
Hey, good to be here. Best Friday ever. No manatees around here, but, hey, we got the Rockies and, got other stuff.
No manatees, huh?
No manatees this week.
All right. If you ever see a manatee out there, you let us know, though, right?
Boy, we've definitely lost the coastline sea of Florida.
Yeah. It'll be quite a thing. All right, moving from Colorado to Harrison, New York, where it's cold.
It's cold, and we're stocking up on wine and beer from Europe because, it's going to get more expensive.
Well, isn't that a great segue? He's our Chief Content Officer, Mike Vizard. Mike, I said something about tribbles, but I meant tariffs. We've got troubles with tariffs, perhaps, here. I think, why don't you kick it off?
This has been foreshadowed for some time now, but we've seen Acer raise prices 10% because of tariffs. I'm sure others are going to follow suit. And we're taking a look at a little bit at how all this stuff is going to impact technology, the big tech companies all the way down to the people who make laptops. Seems like everything's going to get a little more expensive, and it's not clear to me that it's for a good reason. But Alan, what should we expect?
I think we should expect a kick in the rational exuberance where it hurts, right? Irrational exuberance. It's what made this country great. And then every time someone pulls the plug, and this could be the plug coming out here. I mean, look, I call this issue tech sovereignty. Spoke about it yesterday on my Shimmy Says LinkedIn Live segment, and it'll be up on YouTube. The consumer, meaning all of us as consumers, are the ones who are going to get hurt here, right? Because not only does our technology wind up costing us more money, and let's face it, for some of us, we'll say we'll bite the bullet and pay more money because I need it. For some of us, it'll just move that technology a stone too far. right? To do. But we shouldn't think for a second that it doesn't have a reciprocal thing where our technology, our goods become too expensive for people in those markets. And some of those markets are pretty damn big, right? And so this has a rebound domino effect around the globe that we wind up just like we have data sovereignty, where we're going to keep our data just on our in our borders. We're just going to keep our technology within our borders, and we'll all wind up driving those little bad cars that they had in the Soviet Union right before it collapsed, because we don't have access to other vehicles, right? Because the other flip side of this is it stifles innovation, right? If I'm in essence selling in a walled garden, a protected market, where I don't have to worry about external competition, where is my, and I can't sell to external markets because I've been shut out. Where's my motive for innovation? Where's the market at work here? So this is going to put a hurt. I don't realize, I think America is rah, 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 but this cuts both ways, and it's going to put a hurt on these large American technology companies who need the world market to make the money they do. We can't make enough money just selling to a US market.
Lisa, there's a cascading effect here, and I wonder if marketers are talking about it yet, because if I can't hire, or if I can't keep enough people employed, then I start to lay folks off, and then it has a cascading effect through all kinds of vertical industries. And suddenly the people who might be working for, I don't know, Dell or HP, pick whoever, can't afford to buy that car, and then et cetera, et cetera. So quite literally, are we, to Alan's point, about to shoot our toes off?
It's a really precarious situation that we're in over the last couple of weeks. We've seen China reacting. Like you mentioned, Acer is already saying we're going to have to raise our prices by 10%. I think it's going to be a challenge for every organization to understand how this is actually going to unfold, how it's going to impact the end user, the consumer of whatever product it is, whether it's an Acer laptop or something more from Apple, or a product you're buying on Amazon or eBay. And I think that from an employment perspective, organizations are going to have to be really mindful about how they're hiring, who's on their teams, what talent they need to have to be able to combat the price increases that they're no doubt going to have to invoke in order to survive and make the money that they are used to making.
I don't know. Chris, is this buy American? How far are we going to go? Do I have to wait for a laptop that's going to be made in, I don't know, I'll pick Ohio or wherever it might randomly be? That might be what, 3 years from now, if I'm lucky?
If you're lucky. I was going to say 2035. Even I can't find anything good to say about this. So look, this is a freedoms issue, right? Free market capitalism, freedom of speech, democracy, all these things, open source, free internet. These are very American topics, not uniquely American, but this is one of our founding principles. And we've watched, and maybe all of us here have had some hand in, selling products to countries like China, who want to have the Great Firewall, they want to have the closed system. We watched Russia go through this in the last 5 years, trying to have the every nation's an island approach to things. And in my opinion, we rightly look at that and say, fine, go ahead. You will reduce your competitiveness geopolitically, globally, economically, and we will stay open and engaged. But tariffs are a thing. Sometimes you need to do things. Free speech, doesn't mean you can yell fire in a theater. To have free markets and proper, capitalism, you need some rules. And if you look at, of course, my focus on supply chain, I've looked at the presidential executive orders across the Obama, Trump, Biden, and Trump, and this current administration on supply chain. And interestingly, they kind of line up. There are some reasons to do things, and the two political sides can throw this back and forth. You did it too. But what we're doing right now, blanket tariffs, this is the Great Firewall thing again. We're going to make a wall around America, and that's going to work better than it doesn't work in China or it doesn't work in Russia. No, This is not a useful approach. And we're just doing a big transfer from the consumer into the government. Every tariff is a tax on every product that goes from the private sector into the public sector, which again, is not particularly an American approach. We like to have money in private hands so that people can innovate as opposed to shoveling it into a federal coffer.
Alan, how silly would this get? Because I remember being down in Florida and you go to the mall and people would be coming up from South America, various countries, and they would buy a suitcase and then load up crap in it and make like they owned it the whole time. And so, are we going to see Americans doing that overseas?
Yeah, I mean that. But most of the goods they were buying were not made here. They just bought them here. They all came from China for the most part, or Thailand, or Vietnam, or wherever else in the world. Right, because it goes back to Tom Friedman's flat Earth. Capital goes to it's like liquid. It goes to the lowest, to the most efficient place, usually. And now you're kind of messing with the natural laws of physics there, if you will. But how bad can it get? Let me give you the worst case scenario. Actually, in a best case scenario, other countries retaliate and they put up their own walls, and we all live in this walled garden where we all keep we all consume everything we make. And that's a best case scenario. If you believe, the rose-colored glasses if you believe the people with rose-colored glasses, the world will come begging at their knees to please give them access to the U.S. market. They can't exist without it. I don't think that's what's going to happen. So at best, we have this walled garden where Europe is its own market, China is its own market, the U.S. is its own market, etc. But it gets worse. It could get worse. Canada, Mexico, go make deals with China. China, go make deals with Europe. As a matter of fact, Europe, China, Canada, Mexico, the rest of the industrialized world as we know it says, you know what? We don't need America. Between the 6, 7 of these markets, we're 3 times the size. Let America keep America. We're going to do our own AI. We're going to we proved we can do it cheaper and better. We're going to do our own space systems. We're going to grow our own food. We're going to do our own tech. Thank you very much, Google, Apple, and Microsoft. Nice knowing you.
And this is, I grew up in the 70s, and watching this play out through the 80s, the free market, remember when the GOP, when I was a Republican, right, the argument was you shouldn't limit, the U.S. federal government shouldn't limit an American citizen's rights and ability to do commerce internationally. Again, certain tariffs rules, we're not talking about.
Well, you weren't allowed to bribe people, which you can now.
No, right. Yeah, and
just want to throw that in.
And we won, right? The Cold War. We got China and Russia basically to accept capitalism. I mean, that whole argument that we were making back then that has driven positive change in the world. And now we're arguing the opposite. Smaller is better, lock the doors, put up the walls. Historically, as you look across nations, states, that's a very normal thing to do. The modern era and the benefits we have are predicated basically on not doing that. So now we're adding to the drag on the system, which will slow down economic growth and everything that goes along with it. Yes.
Well, one of the things that this does is it forces everyone to start looking at their supply chain and what alternatives do we have. And where it hurts is where you don't have alternatives, whether it's shipped from Taiwan or China, or goods from Canada for building homes and things like that. So it's something that I saw this interview, and it actually had someone who said, no, tariffs aren't a tax on us. They're a tax on the person who makes the goods. And the interview was also with a second party who was a importer of goods. And he explained, he said, no, I've been doing this for 30 years. It sits on the dock until I pay the tariff in order for the good to enter the country. And, I don't eat that. That goes into my pricing to my customers. So I think America's going to learn pretty quick what tariffs are really about, who really pays those amounts, and what's politics and what's reality of it. So I also think that a lot of this is bluster, to try to get out the big hammer and swing it around. as soon as you hear people complaining about it on the news, being interviewed by the local TV station, it's not going to be pretty.
Look what we've done for the price of eggs.
Look at those eggs. That's
let
dropped
me-
a lot, hasn't it?
Yeah, let me wrap up a little bit on this. I lost my thought there for a second, Mitch, with the eggs thing. But what we have, or what we're going to have, is, you know what? Cancel my thing. I forgot what I wanted to say.
Right.
We're going to talk about tribbles.
Wait,
No.
let me jump in there and then you can kick
All
it
right,
in.
you go, Mike.
All right. So let's take this to its nth logical conclusion. Would we see, Alan, U.S. companies deciding to move their headquarters outside of the U.S. because it just made more economic sense for them to pay taxes somewhere else?
Well, if the markets are there, look, laws of physics don't change. That's a science fact. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but facts are facts, right? It's another hard lesson I think we have to learn. Facts are facts. Opinions are like buttholes. Everyone has one. So if it makes economic sense to move your headquarters out of the U.S. because you have economic advantages in selling to a bigger market, making more money, it's going to happen. That's the way markets work. It is what it is with that. And who can blame them, quite frankly? Who can blame them? You got to go where your business is.
I just wouldn't recommend calling someone else's opinion a butthole, but that's a different topic.
Well, sometimes I do, but here's the good news. Here's the good news. If all of these countries stop taking guns that we manufacture here, think of all of the guns that'll be available here. That's the good news.
Or the guns that might never get made. It's another thought.
Oh, no, we won't stop making guns. We're America. We make guns in America.
America.
So, it's going to be an interest. As it plays out, it will be interesting, certainly. Nothing else. We'll take a break here on Techstrong Gang. Let's come back and talk about software supply chains. Does it feel like we're shoveling sand against the tide? We'll go to our boat person right after this.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
Hey folks, we're back. And if you hadn't noticed, there was a report about the Lazarus Group, which is associated with North Korea, as attacking various software repositories that are out there. And I feel like we've talked about this issue before, but I cannot help but wonder if these hubs are essentially defenseless because, well, maybe all the warnings and concern about DevSecOps just gets lost in the noise. Or, Chris, is there something else at work here where we can't seem to get our act together around the notion that these things are part of the attack surface?
Well, we're getting our head around it, right? I was just thinking I should know this. I don't know if we share the backgrounders for these segments with the viewers, but if we don't, we should, right? Because there's an article on the background on this one about, are we defenseless in supply chain? And the short answer is, for most organizations, kind of yes. That's where we are. And we always have been. This has been a known issue for a long, long time. This is about inventory. It's do you know who you are, what you have, what it's doing, and what's going on around you? That's one way to look at situational awareness on that. Do you know what you have? No, right? Just inventory of the hardware in organizations has evolved well. We have asset inventory stuff and so forth. Inventory of the actual software. What's in the software? That's where we are right now. That's this is, when we talk supply chain now, we're talking about people putting code inside the code that you actually bought. And the people you bought it from didn't know that it was there because they're including open source libraries and whatnot. And there's been no way logistically and economically to do better than that until about now. So and then that background article, as we're talking about in the green room, I think defenseless is the wrong word. It's more defensible. Is this reasonably something that you as a small organization can defend yourself against now? No. However, there are major vendors, there are banks and other organizations that have been working on this for years. It can be done quite well. And I think in the right sectors that have the resources and have the motivation and so forth, I think in the next, in this decade, in the next several years, we will see some systems that are remarkably defensible and defended from these sort of attacks. But we're just not there yet. Not for everyone.
Well, right now we talk about the software supply chain security. And a lot of that is talking about what are the software that goes into our software creation process, whether it's open source or NPM package managers, PyPy for Python. I think it's almost one step beyond that, though. We're at a point where we need to think about this as software supply chain integrity, just like we do software supply chain integrity for products, right? It isn't just the Tylenol that someone broke into and put in some, foreign substance that we don't want in our bottle of Tylenol capsules. It's the ingredients that go into making, the product. And in this case, we're talking about software. And so what is the integrity of all of the ingredients of software, whether it's libraries or repositories or our own, as well as the manufacturing process, our own tool chains. So I think we have to kind of trace it back one more step and learn the lesson that we did in the physical supply chain about it's the integrity and the provenance of where things came from in really knowing what's going into our software. And ultimately, that's where it's headed. That's what you have to do to really secure the whole supply chain.
In my cynical moments, Alan, I will look at this and I will say, wow, we've been talking about this for a while. And then I wonder if the cyber criminals and the folks over in North Korea read these discussions, watched these videos and said, what an awesome idea. And now we're going to see more of it because they figured out that they can do it. So how much of this is kind of we kind of led them to the right idea?
No, well, look, the bad guys never miss an opportunity to take advantage of a weakness, right? They're not Me Too guys. They're not followers. They're always probing and figuring out. But this is this particular thing we're talking about here is sort of an obvious whole weakness that's been exploited a number of times. Here's the real facts. And I think most of our audience probably knows this because we deal with a lot of developers and a lot of cybersecurity people. But for those who don't, let me explain it to you. 80% or so of the components that go into any app that you're using today are probably open source or pre-existing components that get stitched together Frankenstein style into an application. These open source or prefabbed components aren't just existing out on the edge, wherever the edge in the cloud is. They live in something we call repos, repositories. And there are some very, very big repos. The Nexus repo, Artifactory, GitHub itself is a huge repo, right? There's probably less than a dozen repos that probably account for 90+% of all the software components that go into every application that we use today. That concentration represents an opportunity for supply chain security because there's an obvious choke point. That choke point exists when you download that component from a repo. It's got to be downloaded. I've never understood why we haven't put the onus on these repo managers to check the integrity of the software that's being downloaded from the repo. If we could do that, we'd go a long way to improving our software supply chain security. Now, I recently had a conversation with a security vendor who actually manages one of those large repos. Mitchell knows who it is. I don't know if they've announced this product yet. But they're doing just that. They're going to put, you want to call it a firewall? Chris, you like firewalls. You want to call it a firewall at the repo that says, hey, before you download it, I'm going to make sure this is the right file. It's the latest. It doesn't have a known vulnerability. The checksum is correct, whatever, right? But we're not going to let you download an insecure component. Now, the real win will be if someone says, I can make one firewall that works across all of the repos, not just any one repo. Because as I said, there's probably less than a dozen that you want to hit. But if we could do that, and I don't know for the life of me why we haven't done it yet, right? But if I was going to go start a company, I'd go do that right now. Go build a repo firewall that works across the 10, 12 biggest repos, and I'm going to filter out any bad stuff and watch what it does for our software supply chains. Chris, I saw you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've always loved supply chain because it just begs all the questions, right? Firewalls are great, right? I started my career in firewalls, and it's a very simple thing on the edge of your thing. You should probably do a stop. Supply chain, threat intelligence, spreads that. We've done it in the last 20, 25 years. How do I actually get outside my walls? Again, to our first segment, topics like that. And we're pretty good at that. But with supply chain, there is no single point, right? And a number of us have been working on this for a long time. I think I have a vision. I think a view on architecture that I think works, has been tested enough. But you have to include, yes, repos, and I've been working with various repos and so forth over the last couple of years. They've been going down this road. They're getting better. They have a role to play. But when you look at the entire supply chain, you take a high demand sector and put all the pieces together from the ISAC that's already sharing information and the vendors and the integrators. You have a lot of choices. The sort of firewall answer is I'm going to take all my supply chain information and get it in advance and have it in one spot. And that makes you think through the fact that this is not how anything works, because it's dynamic. What we really need to do is represent our entire supply chains. And this, to my earlier point, in critical enough industries, that can be done today, and I think will be done in the very, very near future in real-time ways, so that every regulation, every contract, every agreement, the characteristics that define my relationship with my supply chain partners and their supply chain partners is not just something I can call legal and pull up in 2 weeks, but is actually acting. So when I want, for example, an SBOM from a third-tier provider and everyone has agreed in advance that I will get that within 12 milliseconds, I'll have it in 12 milliseconds. And I will have the right.
And then what are you going to do? But then what are you going to do?
We could do a whole half hour on that one, but right, because that's what, again, supply chain forces you to go through all the steps, and they're not infinite. And in our entire industry, for my decades of doing this, we're addressing the firewall. We're coming up with one thing at a time. That's a good idea. It needs to be done. But putting it all systemically together, doing the Dirk Gently's holistic detective agency inevitability curve sort of thing, takes a long time. But we're getting there. And supply chain is one of the things that forces us to work through each of those steps, where we find I think we have workable answers at each of those steps. We don't have the workable system that ties it all together.
As much as I'm all about software supply chain security and think that that's critical for us to do, seems to me though that that's a step along the way to zero trust software. Let's learn the lesson from security, right? We can firewall things off, we can protect things, but until you're in a world where I don't trust any software that's part of that I'm building software from, and that's the attitude you have to have of, just because it came from Google doesn't mean that I trust it, or just because it came from this repo and I know the repo said that they are going to secure it doesn't mean that I believe that it's secure. It's sort of the old trust but verify. Maybe it's don't trust and also verify. That's the whole zero trust model. And I think that's ultimately where we have to go to be able to secure this.
So my problem is, though, and this is the problem in security. If security is too much of a pain in the ass, no one wants to do it. And is what you just described too much of a pain, PIA? Because if it is, it's not going to get done. And maybe that repo firewall resides not at the repo, but at the gateway to my supply chain. But somewhere you need, look, I'm a child of network security. That's where I got introduced into security. It's all I know.
But
Right.
but that's my point, Alan, is just knowing that you go through certain certifications or you fill out my questionnaire that says that you follow good security practices still doesn't mean something can't happen.
No,
Something can't
I
get
want
into your
that. I
software.
want to scam
So
that
you have to have
software.
the zero trust is I got to be able to defend against wherever it comes
Well,
from.
I
even
got
if
to be
do
able to
trust.
test whatever I'm taking down. I got to be satisfied that it's
So
legit.
I think I'm actually making the point you're making, which
Okay.
is that's zero
Once
trust.
again, Mitchell, you and I are in violent agreement. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Hey,
And what-
Lisa, as you
Yeah.
listen to this conversation and you got all these guys talking about security, I'm just reminded of that phrase that says, every company is a software company. And I have a really warm, fuzzy feeling right about now.
Yeah. Yeah. I see two parallel paths here on the marketing side and the learning side. On the marketing side, any company that's a software company needs to be able to explain, because trust is currency with its customers, how they're sourcing software, that it is secure, that they can guarantee that. And then on the learning side, is this for developers and organizations to be continually educated about all the things that are popping in, whether it's from the Lazarus Group in North Korea or other bad actors, because the cyber attack landscape is spreading so amorphously. I really see two parallel paths on the continual education side, but the marketing side as well, because consumers need to understand that what they're downloading, the apps they're interacting with, for example, even if they don't understand the technology, that the data is secure and it's kept there. And that's something I think is a huge challenge for any organization these days.
Seems to me software should come with a warning label.
Oh, it does.
Yeah.
That's the S-bomb. You can't tear it off. It's a federal offense.
Just explicit lyrics. That's all.
Yep. All
Well,
right.
there's sort of three phases, right? In each of these things, as we're all saying, we've all been aware of this issue forever, right? You can mandate something when it's impossible and nobody will do it because it's impossible. You can mandate something when it's possible and force, whether internally I'm mandating a firewall in 1990 cost $100 million a year, right? And there were 10 or 100 of them in the world. Mostly internally managed organizations, said this is worth it. This expense is worth it for us. But at a certain point, by 2000, if you don't get a firewall, you're going out of business because you're losing money. And I think as I said, I think right now, if you're mandated internally or externally to really secure your supply chain, and you really should, you can do it. It's expensive. It's a cost. But I think we'll move fairly rapidly as these things go into the point where if you don't do it, your costs are higher. Because a lot of benefits other than security, logistics and management, knowing where your stuff is and spending less time and money running your world is when security really gets adopted, when it's not a burden.
I think we'll wait and see on this. All right. Let's take a break here on this one. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about serendipity as a strategy. I know Lisa's been waiting the whole show for this. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, we're back and we're talking about serendipity, which in my mind at least is a happy accident that I discovered something and it was all not pre-programmed. But here we are in the age of AI, and some of those social media folks talking about using AI to, program serendipity. Lisa, walk us through how this works, because in my mind, these are conflicting thoughts.
That's a great point. It is a bit conflicting in terms of the use of the word serendipity and what it means in real life. But you picture this, you're scrolling through Netflix or Spotify or any sort of streaming service. You're not sure what you're in the mood for. And suddenly a movie pops up or a song or a playlist, and you just think, that's weird, but yes, that's what I want right now. That's what's known as AI-powered serendipity, where it's using multimodal machine learning and taking all these explicit and implicit signals you're giving the service to surprise and delight you in, hopefully, a non-creepy way. So what it's doing is it's looking at different data types, textual data. What are you searching for in your search queries, for example? Visual data. Are you pausing? If you're watching Netflix, for example, are you pausing or hovering over certain thumbnails? Maybe you're a big fan of beach scenes in movies and you pause on lots of beach scenes. So it's starting to get those implicit signals to be able to tailor the experience for you. And then it's behavioral data combined with the visual and the textual to understand what you're clicking on, what you're scrolling on, that sort of thing, to give you the idea is this really hyper-personalized experience that's going to deliver something that surprises and delights you. But what we have to be concerned about is AI algorithmic bias. Algorithms used to be deterministic. If you like A, then you'll probably like B. And now we have all these other signals coming in, taking note about what we're doing, how we're interacting with an app, for example, to serve up content it thinks we might like. But we have to be concerned. Any company that's using this, and companies already are, I think have to be really, really explicit with their users, because trust is currency, as we talk about all the time. And if my data about what I'm hovering over is going to be used to help me, I want to know that as a consumer of any sort of product. So data privacy, I think, needs to become much more transparent for any organization that's going to be using AI to surprise and delight customers in this serendipitous way.
How far will this go? Because it's not just me. I mean, I'm friends with Mitch there, and if the machine knows that he likes Batman, suddenly I'm going to get all this weird Batman shit from him because we're friends, and all these groups that we're in kind of send the signal,
Yes.
right?
They do. Those are more signals that are coming in that the devices, the software is interpreting. We talked about this the other day with Alexa and all the things that it's doing and sharing from a data perspective, like people in your household, people you're friends with, email addresses. So the concern there is, how do you stop this spread? How is it contained in a way that is applicable to this end user only, so that they get an experience that is delightful rather than creepy? I don't know whether I think those lines are blurred right now. I think we're going to see more of that, because I don't think, I mean, right now, when you look up something on your laptop for a product and then it appears all over your social feeds that you're scrolling on your phone through. Are our friends and associates and people that we have text threads going to get similar information? I think it's highly possible, and it's probably already happening.
Well, first of all, Mike, you should be watching more Batman, but that's for another conversation. Your life would be much enriched. But anyway, yeah, so we're talking about, just if you want to combine the two topics, serendipitous is sort of happy accident, is my unsophisticated definition of it. And that's what machine learning is doing. Is in essence, it's taking and doing rich analysis around users' behavior, and it's doing that, of course, on large amounts of users. So it's doing more than just correlating. This video is tagged as a cartoon character, comic book character, and it's Batman, and so is this over here. So let's suddenly start showing you Batman clothing or something, or trinkets. It's really looking at the behavior of the user, and so that can take into a lot of factors. It could take in time of day, can take in more recent patterns, could take into account historical patterns. It can also take into account other people who have similar patterns that you do, that you may not share exactly the same thing with, and learning from your reactions to what it think might be a serendipitous behavior. So popping up that Batman reference might be, yeah, that's very cool, or no, that sounds like Mitch, and I don't like his stuff anyway. But it's part of it. There's a sort of a fine line between personalization and creepy, right? At one point, is it okay? Who's watching right now? How did you know that? That was really great. I really appreciate that. That was super valuable. I'm glad it happened.
So, Chris, does this not feel like a recipe for the perfect online scam and a little social engineering? And I take all these signals and I kind of send you something that's like so spot on, you just can't help yourself.
Oh, on that thread, I mean, this is going on right now and has been for a while, from the Cambridge Analytica, desktop to today. The issues are the same, right? The same tools we need for marketing demographics, right? As a vendor, I don't want to spend extra money on advertising and marketing and outreach because if my competitors don't, and I do, then I'll go out of business, right? And it's been true since the dawn of time. You know that on a stormy day 50,000 years ago that everybody gathers by this rock and you have all this raw fish you would like to trade for things, so every Friday you're there. We know these demographics. The as you said, downside of this is we are and have been open, and not just open but actively exploited by malicious actors, we using nation state resources down to the individual level. This is another path down, part down this path. The risk for further exploitation, the sort of nightmare scenarios are unacceptably high. Again, my hope for this one is that as this, I think we're already there, right, at peak creepy. The creepiness factor will be enough to drive the necessary and entirely possible adaptations from a security and privacy perspective, so that we can, by reducing the creepiness factor, reduce the actual risk of malicious exploitation.
I think some of it's in the delivery too, Chris, because if you can imagine, if it's something you trust, like let's say you do have a bot that personalizes things for you and says, "Hey, Chris, I found this really interesting reference. I think you might like it." You're like, okay, I know who that is. I know that, even though it's a bot, it gave it to me, versus suddenly this popping up in my feed and like, how the hell did it know that? A lot of it is the delivery or the source of what you view the source of how that got to you. Yeah.
Well, if
Let me-
you think about it as, AI is going to give us assistants, right? Everybody gets an assistant, they get a staff, which is wonderful. But look how this plays out in a really effective organization, a good corporation. You got the CEO, for example, sitting there and all these people around him helping that person make decisions. Then the negative version, you have some royal court where the monarch at the center can't actually see the real world anymore because they're surrounded by sycophants and
This
corruption.
sounds familiar.
And right. So, this can go either way. It does go either way, right? It can either be very helpful or it can be its own disease.
Lisa,
Let me
Chris,
wait. I'm sorry.
Lisa and Chris used the phrase. I just want to check in with you on this. Peak creepy in there. We're at that point right now. I mean, I just heard
Yes.
a bunch of marketers say challenge accepted.
Hold my beer. Hold my beer.
Oh, my beer, exactly. The line, I think, between hyper-personalized, delightful experiences and creepy is so thin. It's blurry, but I think it's a dotted line right now, because we're seeing companies already do this. We're seeing organizations in media, entertainment, social media, for example, hospitality, already using multimodal machine learning in this way to be able to deliver these delightful experiences. But any marketer would need to be aware of, how are we doing this? What are the outcomes that we're delivering? And can we explain how we're doing this to our users to maintain their trust, to show them it's not creepy, there's no algorithmic bias happening here? That's a huge job for any organization. Marketing can take the charge there, because that line is so dotted, and maybe very sparsely dotted at this point, between relevant, contextual, and creepy.
So here, I have a bright line for creepy, right? It's one thing to use machine learning and AI to say, I'm in the Batman club, so I probably like Iron Man too. Oh, that's a DC to Marvel thing. Maybe not. But, so it's one thing to gather what groups I belong to on LinkedIn, Facebook, what have you, people I follow on Twitter or whatever. It's another thing, and then present products or things to me based upon that. I get that that's part of the thing, and I don't think that crosses necessarily to creepy. Creepy is when I'm talking to my child or my wife about something and I get a pop-up for that thing. And this is like Lisa, if you remember, I think it was last week or the week before, a case was started in California against Amazon that they were listening in. Listening in is creepy. Message to marketers, don't be listening in. If I'm giving you permission to track where I go online, what groups I interact with, what banners I click on, I get what I deserve. And you know what? Sometimes I do get some very serendipitous kind of things that I didn't think of. I especially like it when they recommend movies or TV shows that I've never heard of that I wind up loving, right? I've caught a lot of those lately. But I don't like when they're listening in. That to me that's peak creepiness.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. So that needs to be a key message. We're not that we're not listening unless you're opting in specifically.
You want to do that,
then
God
do
bless
it.
you. But to me, that crosses the creepy line where I'm not going to buy stuff from you or contribute to your creepiness.
Well, and this is where some of my supply chain thoughts, because again, as a vendor, if I was that vulnerable to that sort of creepiness, crashing my market, it's possible that I might go to this extent of saying, we will give you, a trustworthy to a given, high level of trust, little archive of everything we ever touch, record, everything right there all the time in your hands, not in ours, that sort of thing. Because in supply chain context, we have to have those things, in the near term future in certain areas to run anything. As a product vendor serving consumers, you can put that sort of thing together. You just go over the fence. Not only are we not listening, we will be really absolutely clear with you everything we touch, everywhere we put it. Why not? What do you have to lose?
Maybe that's where we're headed.
Well, Jeepers Creepers, I got all this email from Batman that I got to go answer, so I got to go.
Okay, Boy Wonder. I'm Iron Man. Hey, we got to go though, because we're out of time here on Techstrong Gang. Have a great weekend, everyone. Stay tuned. Monday, we'll be back with even more great Techstrong Gang and Techstrong TV material. It's been a crazy week here. So much going on. I'm telling you, this show is therapy. Mitch, Lisa, Chris, Mike, thanks for joining us on The Gang. Thank you for joining us on The Gang. Stay tuned for the rest of Techstrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel. We're out.